The space station floated silently above Earth, its metal walls humming with quiet energy. Inside the main meeting room, two very different groups sat across from each other at a long table. The air felt thick with tension. Commander Zethkar stood 7 feet tall, his green-scaled skin catching the bright lights overhead. His yellow eyes moved slowly across the humans sitting opposite him. Behind him, 3 other aliens waited quietly. They all looked dangerous, with sharp claws and teeth that could tear through metal. On the other side of the table, Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez adjusted her blue suit and looked directly at the alien commander. She had been chosen to speak for all of Earth because she never showed fear, even when facing creatures that could kill her with one swipe of their claws. Next to her sat Dr. Amy Patterson, a young woman with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a white lab coat and kept a small notebook in her hands. Her job was to study these aliens and learn everything she could about them. Behind her stood Captain Jake Morrison, a tall man in military uniform whose hand rested near his weapon. Kevin Clark, Dr. Patterson's assistant, sat at the end of the table with a tablet computer, recording everything that happened. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, taking notes about every word and movement. Commander Zethkar had been watching humans for many years from far away. His people, the Vorthik, lived on a world of swamps and deadly creatures. They were warriors who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. To them, humans looked weak and soft. "We have come to offer your species a place in the Galactic Federation," Zethkar said in a deep voice that sounded like gravel grinding together. "You will serve under stronger races and provide what resources we need." Ambassador Rodriguez smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. "We appreciate your offer, Commander. However, Earth would prefer to join as equal partners, not servants." The alien commander's lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Equal partners? Your species has barely left its home planet. You know nothing of the galaxy's dangers or the power needed to survive them." Dr. Patterson watched the alien carefully, making mental notes about his behavior. She noticed how he moved his hands when he spoke and how his scales changed color slightly when he became angry. These details might be important later. "Strength comes in many forms," Ambassador Rodriguez replied calmly. "Perhaps we have abilities you haven't considered yet." Zethkar laughed, a harsh sound that made Kevin look up from his tablet nervously. "What abilities could you possibly have? Your bodies are fragile. Your weapons are primitive. Your lifespans are shorter than most galactic species." Captain Morrison stepped forward slightly, but Ambassador Rodriguez raised her hand to stop him. She stood up slowly and walked around the table toward the alien commander. "In human culture, we have a custom. When making agreements," she said, extending her right hand toward Zethkar, "we shake hands to show trust and respect between parties." The alien commander stared at her outstretched hand with confusion. In Vorthik society, physical contact meant something very different. When 2 Vorthik touched, it was either to fight or to show that one was submitting to the other's power. Zethkar saw the human female's gesture as a challenge. She was either trying to prove she was stronger than him, or she was offering to submit to his authority. Either way, he would show her the mistake she was making. Instead of taking Ambassador Rodriguez's hand, the alien commander reached out quickly and grabbed Dr. Patterson's wrist with his scaled fingers. His grip was firm but not painful, meant to demonstrate his control over the situation. "I will touch who I choose," he said, looking directly into the young scientist's eyes. "Your people need to learn their place in the galaxy's natural order." "Doctor." Patterson did not cry out or try to pull away. She looked back at the alien commander with calm, steady eyes that seemed to see right through him. For a moment that lasted too long, neither of them moved, Something strange happened in that moment. Of contact. Zethkar expected the human to show fear or anger or submission. Instead, he felt something he could not name moving from her skin into his own. It was warm and complex and completely foreign to anything he had ever experienced. The feeling spread up his arm like electricity, but softer and more confusing. Images flashed through his mind that were not his own memories. He saw a small human child learning to walk, falling down and getting back up again. He felt the warmth of sunlight on skin that was not scaled. He experienced the taste of something sweet that his people had never eaten. Dr. Patterson continued to look at him with those steady eyes, and now there was something else in her expression. It wasn't fear or anger. It was something that made him feel exposed, as if she could see parts of him that even he didn't understand. "Interesting," she said quietly, her voice carrying a note that made his scales prickle. "Your nervous system is more sensitive than we thought." Zethkar released her wrist and stepped back quickly, trying to shake off the strange sensations flooding through his mind. The other humans in the room were watching him carefully now, and he realized that something had changed in the balance of power. Ambassador Rodriguez had not moved from where she stood, but now she was smiling in a way that made the alien commander feel uneasy. "As I was saying, Commander, humans have abilities that might surprise you." Captain Morrison's hand had moved closer to his weapon, but his expression showed no alarm. If anything, he looked pleased about what had just happened. Kevin Clark was typing rapidly on his tablet, recording every detail of the encounter. The other aliens behind Zethkar were shifting nervously. They had seen their commander handle dangerous creatures and enemy warriors without showing any weakness. But now he looked confused and off balance, and they didn't understand why. Dr. Patterson rubbed her wrist gently where the alien had grabbed her, but she didn't seem hurt or upset. "I hope you found that educational, Commander." "We certainly did." "What did you do to me?" Zethkar demanded, though his voice sounded less certain than before. "We didn't do anything," Ambassador Rodriguez replied. "That was simply the result of physical contact with a human. Something your people might want to consider before making any hasty decisions about our place in the galaxy." The alien commander's yellow eyes darted between the humans, trying to understand what had just happened to him. The strange sensations were fading, but they left behind an uncomfortable awareness that these soft-looking creatures were not what they appeared to be. "This meeting is over," Zethkar announced, turning toward the door. "We will discuss terms later." As the aliens filed out of the room, Dr. Patterson watched them go with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the encounter. She pulled out her notebook and began writing quickly. "What just happened?" Kevin asked, looking confused. Dr. Patterson glanced up from her notes with a small smile. "I think we just discovered humanity's greatest advantage in galactic diplomacy. And I don't think Commander Zethkar is going to sleep very well tonight." Ambassador Rodriguez returned to her seat, straightening her suit jacket. "Well, that was more interesting than I expected. Captain Morrison, I think we should prepare for some very different negotiations tomorrow." The human delegation remained in the meeting room for another hour, discussing what they had observed and planning their next moves. None of them realized that they had just started a chain of events that would change the entire galaxy forever. High above them, in his private quarters, Commander Zethkar lay on his sleeping platform, staring at the ceiling and trying to forget the feeling of warm human skin against his scales. But the memories that were not his own kept flowing through his mind, and for the first time in his life, the powerful alien warrior felt truly afraid. Commander Zethkar had not slept for 3 days. Every time he closed his yellow eyes, strange images filled his mind. He saw things that made no sense to him. A human child blowing out candles on a colorful cake. An old woman crying happy tears while holding a baby. People dancing together under bright lights, their faces full of joy. These were not his memories, but they felt real inside his head. The worst part was the feelings that came with them. His people only felt hunger, anger, fear, and satisfaction after winning a fight. But now he experienced things he had no words for. Warm feelings that made his chest tight. Sadness that had no reason. Hope for things he didn't understand. He sat in his command chair, trying to focus on the reports from his crew. But his mind kept drifting back to the moment when he had touched the human scientist's wrist. Her skin had been so warm and soft. Nothing like the rough scales of his own people. Security Chief Krelthus approached the commander's chair. The massive insect-like alien clicked his mandibles nervously. "Commander, we have a problem. Navigation Officer Sithmar has abandoned his post again." Zethkar's scales darkened with irritation. "Where is he now?" "In his quarters, sir. He's making more of those strange patterns on the walls. He says the human Kevin Clark showed him something called art, and now he cannot stop creating it." "The?" Commander stood up sharply, his claws scraping against the metal floor. This was the third time this week that Sithmar had left his duties to make colored drawings on every surface he could find. The navigation officer had been a reliable warrior for 20 years, but ever since he shook hands with the human assistant, he had become useless. "Bring him to me," Zethkar ordered. While he waited, the commander tried to remember what his ship had been like before the humans arrived. His crew had been efficient and predictable. They followed orders without question, and never wasted time on pointless activities. Now half of them were acting like they had brain damage. Krelthus returned with Sithmar, who carried a bundle of colored marking tools in his forearms. The navigation officer's compound eyes were bright with an expression that Zethkar had never seen before on any Vorthic face. "Commander," Sithmar said happily, "I have discovered the most wonderful thing. These humans create images that serve no practical purpose except to make others feel pleasant emotions. Look at what I have made." He held up a piece of metal covered with swirling blue and green patterns. To Zethkar, it looked like meaningless scratches, but something about the colors made him feel strange inside. "This is not acceptable," the commander growled. "You are a navigation officer, not an artist. Your duty is to plot courses through space, not waste time with useless decorations." Sithmar's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "But Commander, when I create these patterns, I feel something I have never experienced before. It is like the feeling of a successful hunt, but softer and lasting longer." The human Kevin called it beauty. Zethkar wanted to order his officer back to work, but the word beauty stuck in his mind. He had been having similar experiences, seeing things through human memories that his people had no understanding of. Flowers that served no purpose except to look pleasant. Music that was just organized noise, but somehow made emotion stronger. Meanwhile, in the human quarters, Dr. Amy Patterson was conducting her own investigation. She sat at a small desk, covered with data tablets and biological scanners, analyzing blood samples and brain scan readings from the alien crew members. Kevin Clark looked over her shoulder at the information scrolling across the screen. "The changes are getting stronger, aren't they?" "Much stronger," Dr. Patterson replied, adjusting her glasses. "Look at this neural activity pattern from Commander Zethkar. 3 days ago, his brain showed the typical Vorthic structure. Simple, emotional responses, basic survival instincts, hierarchical pack behavior. But now, look at this." She pointed to a series of colorful brain scan images. "New neural pathways are forming every hour. His brain is literally rewiring itself to process complex emotions and abstract concepts. The same thing is happening to every alien who has had physical contact with any of us." Captain Jake Morrison entered the room carrying a cup of coffee. How is this possible? We're just touching them. It's not like we're injecting them with drugs or using some kind of technology. Dr. Patterson leaned back in her chair, thinking carefully about how to explain her discovery. Human skin produces trace amounts of compounds that are essentially drugs to most alien species, but that's only part of it. The bigger factor is something we never expected. She turned to face both men. Humans are naturally empathic. When we touch someone, we unconsciously transmit our emotional state and even fragments of our memories. Most Earth animals can't process this information, so we never noticed it. But alien nervous systems are more sensitive than ours in some ways. Kevin set down his tablet. So when Commander Zethkar grabbed your wrist, he got a direct download of human consciousness? Something like that. And once the connection is made, it seems to be permanent. Their brains keep developing new ways to process human-type emotions and thoughts. They're evolving psychologically in real time. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez entered the room, looking pleased with herself. I just had a very interesting conversation with Commander Zethkar. He wants to renegotiate the terms of Earth's membership in the Galactic Federation. Captain Morrison raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. The terms are suddenly more favorable to us? Much more favorable. He's also requesting that we provide what he calls psychological consultation to other Federation species. Apparently, word is spreading about the effects of human contact, and several alien races are curious about experiencing expanded consciousness. Dr. Patterson frowned. We need to be careful about this. The changes seem to be beneficial so far, but we don't fully understand the long-term effects. What if some species can't handle human emotional complexity? That's exactly what I told him, Ambassador Rodriguez replied, which is why I suggested a controlled study. We select volunteers from different species and monitor the effects of limited human contact. Before anyone could respond, the room's communication system activated. Commander Zethkar's face appeared on the screen, but he looked different than before. His yellow eyes seemed deeper somehow, and his expression carried emotions that no Vorthic had ever shown. Ambassador Rodriguez, he said, his rough voice softer than usual. I need to speak with Dr. Patterson privately. There are things happening to me that I do not understand. The humans exchanged glances. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly. I'll be right there, Commander. After the communication ended, Captain Morrison looked concerned. Are you sure this is safe? He could be trying to trick us. I don't think so, Dr. Patterson replied, gathering her medical equipment. The brain scans show that deception becomes much more difficult once the emotional integration begins. His people evolved as pack hunters who relied on simple, direct communication. Complex lies require the kind of abstract thinking that they're just starting to develop. She headed toward the door, then paused. Besides, I think Commander Zethkar is more afraid of what's happening to him than we are. Imagine suddenly being able to feel love, grief, wonder, and a dozen other emotions you don't have words for. It would be terrifying. Kevin watched her leave, then turned to Ambassador Rodriguez. What if this gets out of control? What if every alien species in the galaxy wants to experience human consciousness? The ambassador smiled grimly. Then we'll have something better than advanced weapons or superior technology. We'll have the power to change how entire civilizations think and feel. The question is, are we ready for that kind of responsibility? In his private quarters, Commander Zethkar waited for the human scientist to arrive. He stared at his reflection in the polished metal wall, trying to recognize himself. The face looking back at him was the same, but the mind behind it was becoming something entirely new. For the first time in his life, he wondered what it would be like to create something instead of destroying it. The thought should have disgusted him, but instead it filled him with a strange excitement that he was only beginning to understand was called curiosity. Dr. Amy Patterson walked slowly through the corridors of the alien space station. The metal walls hummed with energy around her, but she could hear something else too. Soft sounds that had never been heard on a Vorthic ship before. Someone was singing. She followed the sound to a maintenance room, where she found Navigation Officer Sithmar. The insect-like alien was creating another one of his colorful wall patterns while making musical notes with his throat. The melody was simple but beautiful, like nothing his species had ever produced. "Officer Sithmar," she said gently. He turned his compound eyes toward her, his forearms still holding colored marking tools. "Dr. Patterson, I was hoping you would come. I want to show you what I have learned." The walls of the room were covered with swirling designs in blues, greens, and yellows. Some looked like the ocean waves from her memories. Others resembled flowers or clouds or abstract shapes that made her feel peaceful just by looking at them. "These are remarkable," she said honestly. "How do you know what to create?" "I see them in my mind," Sithmar replied, his voice full of wonder. "When I touched the human Kevin, I received images of things I had never imagined. Your people create beauty for its own sake. This concept was completely foreign to me, but now I understand its importance." Dr. Patterson made notes on her tablet. As they talked, the changes in Sithmar were more advanced than in any other alien crew member. His brain had not only developed new emotional pathways, but had also gained the ability to express complex feelings through art. "Does creating these patterns make you happy?" she asked. The alien paused, considering the question. "Happy is a word I learned from Kevin's memories. Yes, I believe this is what humans call happiness. But it is mixed with other feelings too. Satisfaction, peace, and something I think you call fulfillment." Dr. Patterson was writing quickly when Commander Zethkar appeared in the doorway. The large reptilian alien looked tired and confused, his scales a dull green color that suggested stress. "Dr. Patterson, I need to speak with you privately," he said, glancing at the colorful walls with an expression she couldn't read. They walked to his command quarters, a large room furnished with military efficiency. But Dr. Patterson noticed small changes since her last visit. A flowering plant sat on his desk, something no Vorthic would normally keep. The harsh lighting had been dimmed to a softer level. "Something is wrong with me," Zethkar said without introduction. "Since I touched you, my mind has not been my own. I am experiencing thoughts and feelings that make no sense for a warrior. Can you describe what you're experiencing?" Dr. Patterson asked, settling into a chair across from his desk. The commander began pacing, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "Yesterday, I watched my crew working on ship repairs. Instead of seeing efficient soldiers doing their duty, I found myself wondering if they were tired or stressed. I wanted to make their work easier, not because it would improve efficiency, but because I did not want them to suffer." He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "This morning, I saw an image transmission of a battle on the planet Zarian. In the past, I would have analyzed it for tactical information. Instead, I felt pain watching the casualties. I grieved for soldiers I had never met, from species I barely know." Dr. Patterson nodded, making notes. "These are normal human responses, Commander. What you're experiencing is called empathy. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of others." "But I am Vorthic," Zethkar said, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "We are hunters and warriors. We do not waste energy on the feelings of others. This empathy you speak of would make us weak and vulnerable, would it?" Dr. Patterson asked calmly. "Or would it make you stronger in ways you haven't considered?" Before the commander could answer, his communication system activated. Security Chief Krelthus appeared on the screen, his insect features showing unusual agitation. "Commander, we have an urgent situation. The Galactic Federation High Command has dispatched Admiral Kexthul's fleet to our location. They will arrive. Within 6 hours, Zethkar's scales darkened to a deep green. Did they say why? No, sir, but the message was marked as high-priority military action. I believe they received our reports about the humans and decided to intervene. After the communication ended, Dr. Patterson felt a chill run down her spine. Commander, what kind of intervention would the Admiral authorize? Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. Admiral Kexthul commands the Federation's most powerful fleet. His species, the Krillian, pride themselves on logical thinking and emotional control. They view any form of psychological manipulation as a threat to galactic stability. And what would they do about such a threat? They would eliminate it, he said quietly. The Admiral has the authority to destroy entire planets if he believes they pose a danger to the Federation. Dr. Patterson stood up quickly. I need to inform Ambassador Rodriguez immediately. We have to prepare for this. Wait, Zethkar said, moving to block her path to the door. For a moment, she tensed, remembering that he was still a dangerous predator despite his psychological changes. But instead of threatening her, the alien commander did something unprecedented. He knelt down, bringing his head level with hers. Dr. Patterson, I need you to understand something. When I first touched you, it was meant as an act of dominance. I wanted to show your people that we were superior. But what I received from that contact has changed me in ways I cannot fully explain. His yellow eyes met hers with an intensity that was both alien and strangely familiar. Through your memories, I have experienced what humans call love. Not romantic love, but the love of a parent for a child, of friends for each other, of people who care about someone else more than themselves. This is not weakness, as I first thought. It is the strongest force I have ever encountered. Dr. Patterson felt her heart racing. What are you saying, Commander? I am saying that I will not allow Admiral Kexthul to harm your people. Not because of military orders or political calculations, but because the thought of your species being destroyed causes me pain that I cannot bear. He stood up, his full height making him tower over her. When the Admiral arrives, I will try to explain what has happened here. But Krillian do not change their minds easily. You should prepare your people for the possibility of combat. Dr. Patterson hurried back to the human quarters, her mind racing with possibilities. She found Ambassador Rodriguez, Captain Morrison, and Kevin Clark in an urgent discussion about evacuation procedures. We have a bigger problem, she announced, explaining the approaching fleet and Commander Zethkar's warning. Captain Morrison checked his weapon systems. How many ships are we talking about? According to the database, Admiral Kexthul commands 47 warships, including 3 Planet Killer-class vessels. Ambassador Rodriguez replied grimly. Kevin looked pale. What can we do against that kind of firepower? Dr. Patterson thought about her conversation with Commander Zethkar and the changes she had observed in the alien crew members. Maybe we don't have to fight them. Maybe we can change them the same way we changed the Vorthok. You mean touch them? Captain Morrison asked skeptically. How do we get close enough to an enemy fleet to shake hands? I don't know yet, Dr. Patterson admitted. But I'm beginning to understand that human empathy isn't just a psychological phenomenon. It's a form of evolution. We don't just transmit our emotions to other species. We help them develop the capacity for feelings they never had before. Ambassador Rodriguez stood up, straightening her suit. Then we have 6 hours to figure out how to evolve a fleet of logical, emotionless aliens into beings capable of empathy and compassion. And if we fail, Kevin asked, then Earth becomes the first planet to be destroyed for being too emotionally dangerous, she replied. No pressure. As the human team began planning their desperate strategy, Commander Zethkar stood in his command center, watching the approaching fleet on his screens. For the first time in his military career, he found himself hoping that he would not have to fight. The thought should have shamed him, but instead it filled him with something he was learning to recognize as hope. The Federation fleet appeared on the view screen like a swarm of metal insects against the black of space. 47 warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons already charging for battle. At the center of the formation, Admiral Kexthul's flagship gleamed like a crystal cathedral, its geometric design reflecting the cold logic of its builders. Commander Zethkar stood on his bridge, watching the approaching vessels with feelings he still struggled to name. Fear was there, but not the simple survival fear of his people. This was deeper, more complex. He was afraid for the humans sleeping in their quarters below. He was afraid for his own crew members who had been changed by human contact. Most of all, he was afraid of what he might become if he lost the new emotions that had made his life meaningful. Admiral Kexthul is requesting permission to board, Security Chief Krelthus reported, his mandibles clicking nervously. Grant permission, Zethkar replied, but have Dr. Patterson and Ambassador Rodriguez meet us in the main conference room. Sir, are you certain that is wise? The Admiral comes with a reputation for swift action against threats. Zethkar looked at his security chief, remembering when Krelthus had accidentally brushed against Captain Morrison in a corridor 3 days ago. Since then, a massive insect warrior had begun keeping a small collection of smooth stones in his quarters, claiming they felt pleasant to touch. Such behavior would have been impossible for his species before human contact. Chief, do you regret the changes that have happened to you? Krelthus was quiet for a moment, considering the question. No, Commander. I find that I sleep better. Now, my dreams are filled with colors and sounds that bring me peace instead of memories of battles. When I wake, I feel something I think humans call contentment. Then we will show the Admiral what we have learned and hope he has the wisdom to understand. 20 minutes later, Admiral Kexthul materialized in the conference room in a shimmer of transport energy. The Krillian stood 8 feet tall, his body made of what looked like living crystal. Geometric patterns flowed beneath his transparent skin, pulsing with different colors as his thoughts processed information. His face was angular and beautiful in an alien way, but completely without warmth. Behind him stood 2 guards, also crystalline beings, whose bodies reflected light in sharp, precise angles. They moved with mechanical efficiency, showing no emotion or personality. Ambassador Rodriguez and Dr. Patterson were already seated at the conference table, their expressions calm but alert. Commander Zethkar entered with Krelthus, and immediately the Admiral's attention focused on the Vorthic commander. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Kexthul said, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Your reports to High Command have been ... concerning. You claim that these humans possess the ability to alter alien psychology through physical contact. That is correct, Admiral, Zethkar replied, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. The Admiral's crystal body pulsed with pale blue light as he processed this information. Such an ability would constitute a severe threat to galactic stability. Species throughout the Federation rely on predictable behavior patterns from their allies and enemies. Psychological manipulation could destabilize governments and military alliances. Dr. Patterson leaned forward slightly. Admiral, with respect, what we do isn't manipulation. It's more like teaching. We help other species develop emotional capabilities they already possess but haven't learned to use. Emotional capabilities are inefficiencies, the Admiral replied coldly. The Krillian evolved beyond such limitations millions of years ago. We base our decisions on logic and proven data, not on feelings that can change without reason. Ambassador Rodriguez smiled politely. Yet here you are, having traveled across the galaxy, because you felt threatened by the possibility of emotional growth. Isn't fear an emotion? The Admiral's crystal patterns flickered red for just a moment. Krillian do not experience fear. We respond to calculated threats with appropriate countermeasures. Then you won't mind demonstrating the superiority of your logical thinking, Ambassador Rodriguez said, standing up from her chair. I'd like to show you something that might interest you. She walked around the table toward the Admiral, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. In human culture, we have a custom of greeting important visitors personally. It's a sign of respect. Admiral Kexthul watched her approach with the same expression he might give to an interesting but harmless scientific specimen. I am aware of human customs. Physical contact serves no logical purpose in diplomatic encounters. Perhaps not, Ambassador Rodriguez agreed, stopping directly in front of him. But humor us. Surely a being of your advanced evolution has nothing to fear from touching a primitive human. The challenge was subtle but clear. The Admiral's crystal body pulsed with brighter colors as he considered her words. To refuse would suggest that he believed humans actually posed a threat to his mental superiority. To accept would prove Krillian confidence in their emotional invulnerability. Very well, he said, extending one crystalline hand toward her. I will demonstrate that Krillian minds cannot be affected by your psychological techniques. The moment their hands touched, Admiral Kexthul's entire body flashed with brilliant white light. The geometric patterns beneath his crystal skin began moving faster, changing colors rapidly as new neural pathways formed at incredible speed. Ambassador Rodriguez held the contact for exactly 3 seconds, then stepped back. The Admiral remained, frozen in place, his hands still extended, his crystal form cycling through colors that had never been seen in a Krillian. BEFOR. Dr. Patterson watched the readings on her medical scanner with fascination. His neural activity is off the charts. The Krillian brain structure is more complex than any species we've encountered. He's processing human emotional data at a rate that would overwhelm most other aliens. Admiral? Commander Zethkar asked. Carefully, slowly, Admiral Kexthul lowered his hand. When he spoke, his voice carried subtle new tones, harmonics that suggested depth and complexity beyond pure logic. I am experiencing irregularities in my thought patterns, he said, but there was wonder in his voice rather than distress. I am seeing images that are not from my own memory banks. A human child laughing while running through water from a sprinkler. 2 elderly humans sitting together on a bench, holding hands in comfortable silence. A woman crying while reading. A letter, but the tears seemed to be caused by happiness rather than distress. He looked at his crystalline hands as if seeing them for the first time. These images should be meaningless data, but they generate responses in my neural network that I cannot classify as logical or illogical. They simply ... One of his crystal guards stepped forward. Admiral, shall we proceed with the elimination protocol? Admiral Kexthul turned to look at his subordinate, and for the first time in Krillian history, a member of their species hesitated before giving a military order. Guardian, when you look at these humans, what do you observe? Potential threats to Federation stability, sir. Carbon-based life forms with dangerous psychological capabilities. Yes, that is what logic dictates, the Admiral agreed slowly. But I am now observing additional data. They are also individuals with unique experiences, hopes, and concerns about the welfare of others. This Dr. Patterson has devoted her life to understanding other species, not to exploit them, but to build bridges between different forms of consciousness. He turned back to Ambassador Rodriguez. What have you done to me? We've given you the ability to see the universe through more than just logic, she replied gently. Emotions aren't inefficiencies, Admiral. They're additional processing capabilities that help you understand the full complexity of existence. Dr. Patterson approached the Admiral carefully. Your species evolved beyond emotions because you saw them as weaknesses. But what if they're actually advanced survival tools? What if the ability to feel empathy, compassion, and love makes a civilization stronger rather than weaker? Admiral Kekstool was quiet for a long moment, his crystal body pulsing with new colors as he processed concepts that had been impossible for him to understand minutes before. If this is true, he said finally, then the Krillian have spent millions of years becoming less than we could be, not more. Commander Zethkar stepped forward. Admiral, I can tell you from personal experience that these new feelings make everything more complicated, but they also make life worth living in ways I never imagined. The Admiral looked around the room at the faces watching him. For the first time, he truly saw them as individuals rather than just sources of data. I need time to process this information, he said. Guardian, send a message to the fleet. All ships are to stand down and maintain current positions until further orders. Sir, what about the elimination protocol? Admiral Kekstool's crystal patterns shifted to a warm golden color. The protocol is suspended indefinitely. I believe we have much to learn from these humans before making any decisions about their fate. As the meeting ended and the various beings began to leave, Dr. Patterson noticed that Admiral Kekstool lingered behind, staring at his hands with an expression of wonder that would have been impossible for any Krillian before this moment. Galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could have predicted. 6 months had passed since the day Admiral Kekstool first touched a human hand. The space station that once housed a simple diplomatic meeting had grown into something unprecedented in galactic history. Ships from dozens of different species floated nearby, their crews waiting for their turn to experience what was now called the Awakening. Commander Zethkar stood in what had once been his command center, but it looked nothing like a military facility anymore. The harsh metal walls were now covered with artworks created by aliens from across the galaxy. Sithmar's colorful patterns shared space with crystalline sculptures made by Krillian artists and musical notation, written by species that had never conceived of organized sound until they touched a human. The Vorthik commander no longer wore his military uniform. Instead, he had chosen simple clothes that felt comfortable rather than intimidating. His scales had changed color permanently, shifting from the aggressive dark green of a warrior to softer shades that reflected his inner. PEACE Dr. Amy Patterson walked into the room carrying a data tablet and a cup of coffee. She moved with the confidence of someone who had helped reshape galactic civilization, but her eyes still held the same gentle curiosity that had first intrigued Zethkar. "Good morning, Commander," she said, settling into a chair beside his desk. "How are you feeling today?" It was a question she asked him every morning, and one that would have made no sense to either of them 6 months ago. Vorthek had never cared about feelings, and humans had never imagined they could teach emotions to alien species. "I am well," Zethkar replied, and the words carried meanings that his language had never possessed before. "I dreamed last night about the swamps of my home world, but instead of hunting prey, I was watching the way sunlight made patterns on the water. It was beautiful." Dr. Patterson smiled and made a note on her tablet. "The integration process is complete. Your brain has fully adapted to processing human-type emotions and aesthetic appreciation. You're probably ready to visit Earth if you're interested." "I would like that very much," Zethkar said, surprising himself with how true the words felt. "But first, we have new arrivals to greet." Through the large viewing window, they could see a sleek ship approaching the station. It belonged to the Zenthari, a species of gaseous beings who had existed as pure energy for millions of years. They had never experienced physical sensation of any kind, but news of the human ability to share consciousness had reached even them. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez entered the room, looking tired but satisfied. She had spent the last 6 months negotiating with governments across the galaxy, establishing protocols for what had become known as contact centers. These facilities were being built on hundreds of worlds, staffed by human volunteers who helped. Other species develop emotional capabilities. The Galactic Council has just approved the establishment of 50 more contact centers, she announced. We now have requests from over 300 species wanting to experience emotional awakening. Captain Jake Morrison followed her in, carrying a military communications device. We've also received word from Earth. The United Nations has approved the Empathy Protocol. Any species that undergoes the awakening process will be granted full diplomatic immunity and protection under human law. Kevin Clark looked up from his computer terminal, where he had been recording data about the station's newest residents. Dr. Patterson, the psychological analysis of the Xanthari delegation is complete. Their energy-based consciousness is compatible with human empathic transmission, but the process will be completely different from anything we've done before. Dr. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. We'll need to modify our approach. Physical contact won't work with beings made of gas and energy. We'll have to find another way to create the neural bridge. Admiral Kexthuo materialized in the room using his crystal-based transport technology. His body now glowed with warm colors that constantly shifted to reflect his emotional state. The rigid geometric patterns of his species had evolved into flowing, organic shapes that seemed to dance beneath his transparent skin. The preliminary scans of the Xanthari ship show that their consciousness exists as organized electromagnetic fields, he reported. If we could create a harmonic resonance between human brain waves and their energy patterns, it might produce the same effect as physical contact. The Admiral had become the station's chief researcher, applying his logical thinking to the challenge of expanding consciousness across species barriers. But his approach now included emotional considerations that would have been impossible for him before his own awakening. Commander Zethkar stood up from his desk. Shall we greet our new visitors? The group made their way to the main docking bay, where the Xanthari ship had just landed. As they watched, 3 shimmering columns of colored gas emerged from the vessel, floating a few feet above the ground. The beings had no solid form, but their patterns of light and movement suggested intelligence and curiosity. The lead Xanthari spoke through a translation device, its voice sounding like wind through crystal chimes. We are the Xanthari delegation. We have traveled here because we wish to understand this phenomenon you call emotion. For eons, we have existed as pure thought, but we have learned that there are aspects of consciousness we have never experienced. Dr. Patterson stepped forward carefully. We're honored by your visit. What we can offer you is the ability to experience the universe through feelings as well as thoughts. But I should warn you that the process will change you permanently. You may not want to return to your previous state of existence. We have considered this possibility, the Xanthari replied. Our entire species voted on this decision. We chose growth over safety, wonder over certainty. If you can teach us to feel joy, then we accept that we must also learn sorrow. Admiral Kexthul activated a device he had been working on for weeks. It projected a field of electromagnetic energy that began to pulse in rhythm with the human's brainwaves. This should create a bridge between your consciousness and human empathic transmission. Dr. Patterson reached out slowly toward the leading Xanthari, extending her hand into the shimmering gas of its form. At first, nothing happened. Then the electromagnetic field around them began to glow brighter, and the Xanthari's patterns of light suddenly exploded into new colors and shapes. The gaseous being began to pulse with rhythms that had never existed in their species before. Waves of golden light flowed through its form, followed by deeper blues and brilliant reds. The translation device struggled to convert the sounds it was making. I understand now, the Xanthari said, its voice filled with wonder. This sensation you call happiness. It is like the warmth of a star, but inside consciousness itself. And this other feeling, hope. It makes the future seem bright with possibilities I cannot yet imagine. The other two Zenthari beings moved closer, their own forms beginning to change as they shared the empathic connection through their natural energy links. Soon all three were displaying colors and patterns that had never existed in their species. History. Commander Zethkar watched the transformation with feelings that still amazed him. Pride in what they had accomplished. Joy at seeing others discover. The richness of emotional experience. Hope for a galaxy where all species could share understanding on this deeper level. Dr. Patterson, he said quietly, do you ever regret what happened when I first touched you? She looked at him with those same steady eyes that had looked through him 6 months ago. But now they held warmth and friendship that bridged the gap between their species. Commander, that moment was the beginning of the greatest adventure in galactic history. How could I regret giving an entire galaxy the gift of feeling? Ambassador Rodriguez addressed the Zenthari delegation. Welcome to the community of awakened species. We have much to learn from each other. As the day continued, more ships arrived. Species that had spent millions of years locked in logical thinking or simple survival instincts came seeking the expansion of consciousness that only humans could provide. The galaxy was evolving, one touch at a time. Kevin Clark sent out the daily report to Earth, summarizing the progress of what historians would later call the Great Awakening. 300 species had now undergone emotional integration. Conflicts between civilizations had dropped to almost zero, replaced by curiosity and cooperation. Art, music, and literature were flourishing in cultures that had never created anything purely for beauty. Commander Zethkar looked out at the stars and thought about the human girl whose wrist he had grabbed in anger and dominance. That single moment of contact had changed everything, not just for him, but for an entire galaxy. He touched a human girl and regretted it moments later. But now he knew that regret had been the last primitive emotion of his old self. Everything that came after had been worth the transformation. The universe would never be the same, and neither would any being lucky enough to learn what it meant to truly feel.